Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Are you ready to get a little nutty with us today?
Nutty is certainly one way to put it.
Okay, so full disclosure, we got this document from one of you.
From one of our listeners.
Yeah, and it's bizarre to say the least.
I've never seen anything quite like it.
It's literally just a file.
A single file.
Yeah, and it's filled with the word nuts.
Hundreds of times.
Over and over and over again. Just nuts, nuts, nuts. That's it. No other words, no punctuation, nothing, just nuts.
It's definitely a head scratcher.
So you actually got to take a look at this before we hit record today. What were your initial thoughts when you saw this thing?
Well, the repetition obviously jumps right out at you, but I actually started noticing inconsistencies in the spacing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there are these little clusters of nuts kind of grouped together and separated by single spaces.
Huh. So maybe not totally random repetition, that like there could be some kind of pattern buried in there.
Yeah, it's almost like well, it made me think of some things I've seen in cryptography.
Wait a minute, you're saying this could be a code?
I mean, it's a long shot, but there are historical examples of ciphers that use repetition as part of their encoding.
So the key is in how those repetitions are arranged.
Exactly. Subtle variations that would only make sense to someone with the right key.
Okay, so theoretically, someone out there could look at this nuts document and know exactly what it means.
That's the whole point of a code, right? To
Yeah.
make the message incomprehensible to anyone without the key.
But if this I is a code, who is it meant for?
Hmm.
And what are they trying to say with just the word nuts?
That's the real mystery, isn't it? Without more context, it's impossible to know for sure. It could be a message for one person, a group, or even a wider audience that understands a specific system.
Okay, so we've got the code theory on the table.
Mhm.
What about the possibility of this being like a corrupted file? You know, some kind of digital hiccup that turned a normal document into this nuts explosion.
Oh, data corruption is definitely possible. It's like, think of a computer program as a set of instructions. If one of those instructions gets messed up, it can cause the whole program to go haywire.
So you're saying there could have been a perfectly normal document and then something went wrong in the software and it just latched onto nuts and wouldn't let go.
Exactly. It's like a record player stuck in a groove, except instead of music, it's just churning out nuts.
The question is, what kind of software malfunction would even lead to something like this?
That's the tricky part. Nuts isn't exactly standard programming language.
Yeah, how does it even end up as the word that gets repeated?
It's possible the word was part of a larger phrase that got corrupted.
Okay,
You know, imagine a document with the phrase going nuts or something similar.
right.
The glitch could have isolated and amplified that one word, leaving everything else behind.
So like a little snippet of everyday language gets caught in a digital tornado and turns into this this nutty phenomenon. I mean, we're talking about software loops, corrupted files, maybe even secret codes.
And we haven't even touched on the artistic possibility.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. I mean, hear me out on this. Could this be an art piece? Like, is the repetition of nuts the actual message?
Well, repetition is a powerful tool in art. Think about Andy Warhol.
Right, those repeated images.
Exactly. He used the same image over and over, forcing you to see it in a new way.
So maybe nuts is meant to provoke a reaction. Like, what does it make you feel when you see it repeated like that?
I'll be honest, it's a little overwhelming, but it also makes me think about the power of language. Even a simple word can take on a whole new meaning when it's repeated like that.
Right. It's like when a song gets stuck in your head or an artist uses a repeating pattern to create a texture. But in this case, it's just nuts. It's
Okay.
fascinating and bizarre all at the same time.
That's what makes it so interesting. We have all these possible explanations, corrupted files, secret codes, art, and without more context, it's impossible to know for sure.
And this is where you come in. Remember, you sent us this document.
One of our listeners did.
Right, you found it on, mention the listener's specific context, e.g. an old hard drive, an email, so maybe that context can give us some clues.
Exactly. Any additional information you can provide could help us narrow down the possibilities.
So dear listener, what are your initial thoughts? Do you think this is a technical glitch, a coded message, or maybe even an artistic statement? We're genuinely curious to hear your perspective. What stands out to you about this document? What questions does it raise for you? We'll be diving deeper into these questions and exploring more possibilities in part 2 of this deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the nuts document. You know, as we were just saying, the context of where you found this file could be really important.
Absolutely. It's like finding a clue in a detective novel, right? It
Okay.
helps us understand the bigger picture. So tell us more about where you found this unusual file.
Yeah, we're definitely curious to hear about that. And while we wait to hear back from you, let's go back to the code theory for a second.
Okay.
If we assume for a moment that this I is a message hidden in repetition, those spacing patterns we mentioned could be super important.
Right, those clusters of nuts separated by single spaces. It's like,
It's like Morse code.
yeah, like someone's tapping out a message but using nuts as the dots and dashes.
Exactly. Cryptography is all about patterns. The sender could be using a system where the number of nuts in each group, or the spacing between them, corresponds to a specific letter or symbol.
So it's not just about the word nuts itself, it's about how it's arranged on the page. That adds a whole new layer to this mystery.
Exactly. To decipher it, we'd need to find the key, the system that translates those nutty patterns into meaningful information.
Okay, let's say for argument's sake, this I, a coded message. What kind of information could someone even communicate using only the word nuts?
Well, it depends on how complex the code is. A simple code might just use nuts to represent a binary system, 1 nuts for 0, 2 nuts for 1.
Right, right.
But a more sophisticated code could convey whole words, phrases, even sentences.
So theoretically, this document could contain anything from a grocery list to a secret formula, all hidden within those repetitions. That's incredible and kind of scary at the same time.
It really shows you how clever code makers have been throughout history. They've always been finding ways to hide information in plain sight using everyday objects or seemingly meaningless patterns.
Which brings us back to context. Knowing where this document came from, who created it, or who it was intended for, could give us vital clues about the code if there even is one.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle without all the pieces.
Speaking of puzzles, this whole thing reminds me of something you said earlier about art. Could it be that this document, as strange as it seems, is actually an artistic expression?
It's definitely a possibility. Artists have used repetition and seemingly absurd concepts to challenge us and make us think differently.
So maybe this isn't about sending a secret message, but about creating an experience, a feeling.
Exactly. Imagine an art installation with a giant screen just displaying nuts over and over. It could be a commentary on information overload or even a meditation on the absurdity of language.
Wow, okay, that's deep. I never thought I'd be having an existential crisis over a document full of nuts.
Yeah.
But here we are. It makes you question the meaning of everything, doesn't it?
It definitely highlights how subjective interpretation can be. What one person sees as meaningless, another might see as profound.
Okay, so we've explored the code theory, the art angle, and of course the possibility of a corrupted file. But there's still something I'm wondering about. If this is a technical glitch, how likely is it that a program would latch onto the word nuts specifically?
You're right to question that. It's statistically improbable for a random glitch to repeat that specific word. Unless
Come in, don't leave me hanging.
Unless the word nuts was already somewhere in the system. Remember we talked about software loops? Imagine a script that's supposed to print a document, but because of an error, it gets stuck on a particular word.
So like a broken record skipping back to the same spot.
Precisely, but instead of music, it's spitting out nuts because that word was somehow part of the original instructions or maybe the last thing processed before the glitch.
Okay, I see. So the nuts might not be entirely random, but a clue to what the program was doing before it went haywire.
Exactly. It's like finding a fragment of a broken vase. It doesn't show you the whole vase, but it gives you some hints about its shape and purpose.
So are we any closer to solving this nuts mystery? It feels like we've explored so many possibilities, but still don't have a clear answer.
That's what a deep dive is all about. Sometimes the journey is just as important as the destination.
I guess you're right. But I'm still holding out hope that we can crack this nut.
And maybe the key to unlocking this puzzle is in the context you provide. Tell us, where did you find this file? What were you doing when you came across it? Those details could be more important than you think.
We're eager to hear your side of the story and see if we can finally solve this nutty puzzle. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been on quite a journey with this nuts document, haven't we? Codes, art, glitches. It's been a wild ride.
And now we're really excited to hear from you. Remember, you're the one who brought us this mystery in the first place.
Exactly. You found this file while you were mentioning the listener-specific context as provided. You go cleaning out an old hard drive, going through your grandfather's files. So tell us a little more about that. What was going through your mind when you stumbled upon this thing?
Yeah, any details you can give us about the situation could be incredibly helpful. Did you find any other strange files nearby? What kind of programs or devices were associated with this file? We're really trying to get a sense of the bigger picture here.
It's like you found a message in a bottle washed up on shore, and now we need to figure out who sent it and what it means.
Right. Let's go back to the technical glitch theory for a moment. We talked about those software loops and how a program can get stuck repeating a specific instruction.
Right, like when a record skips and plays the same part over and over.
Exactly. But for a loop to occur, there has to be a trigger, some condition that's not being met.
So what could have triggered this nuts loop? Could the word itself have been part of the original document or program?
That's a great question, and it's definitely something we need to consider. If we knew more about the software or hardware involved, we might be able to identify any potential vulnerabilities or common error patterns that could lead to this kind of repetition.
It makes me think about something you said earlier about how the meaning of a word can change depending on the context.
Absolutely. Like the word fire can have completely different meanings depending on whether you're talking about a fireplace, a weapon, or someone losing their job.
Right. So is it possible that nuts had some special meaning within this specific program or document?
It's definitely possible. Maybe it was a placeholder, a variable, or even a command within the software. Or perhaps it was part of a larger phrase that got cut off or corrupted somehow.
So even though it seems like a simple, silly word, nuts might have had a very specific purpose in this digital environment.
That's the beauty of language, isn't it? The same word can hold so many different layers of meaning depending on where and how it's used.
And that's something we often forget in this digital age. We tend to think of computers as these logical machines, but sometimes they can be just as weird and unpredictable as humans.
Now let's shift gears back to the code theory. If we assume that someone intentionally used repetition to hide a message, we need to consider how complex that code might be. A simple code might use repetition in a basic way, like a binary system.
Right, one nuts for zero, two nuts for one, and so on.
Exactly. But a more advanced code could involve all sorts of patterns, variations in spacing, even subtle changes in capitalization or font.
So we need to look beyond just the word itself and analyze how it's presented and arranged on the page.
Precisely. It's like a musical score. The same notes can be played in countless ways, creating completely different melodies.
Okay, that makes sense. So we need to pay attention to the structure and patterns within the repetition itself. And maybe, just maybe, those patterns will unlock a hidden message.
Of course, without the key to the code, it's like trying to read a book in a language you don't understand.
Right.
But even if we never crack the code, the journey of exploring these possibilities has been fascinating, hasn't it?
Absolutely. It's a reminder that there are still mysteries out there, puzzles that haven't been solved. And who knows, maybe someday someone will figure out the key to this Nets code.
Until then, we're left to ponder the possibilities, to wonder about what it all means. This nuts document, as strange as it is, has made us question our assumptions about language technology and the very nature of meaning.
And that's what the deep dive is all about, isn't it? Exploring the unknown, questioning everything, and diving headfirst into the mysteries that surround us.
So even though we may not have all the answers, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and given you a fresh perspective on the world around you.
Keep asking questions, keep exploring, and who knows what other amazing discoveries you might make.
Thanks for joining us on this nutty adventure.
And until next time, keep diving deep.